Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. Today, I want to talk about my experience at the bank because it is a very important place in everyday life. And sometimes it can feel a little stressful or even confusing, especially if you need to speak English there and explain your situation clearly to another person. In this episode, I will share my story step by step and I will try to describe everything in detail so you can learn useful words, phrases, and ideas that you can use in real life situations when you visit a bank. So, let me start from the very beginning of my day. Yesterday morning, I decided to go to the bank because I had a few important things to do. First of all, I had a problem with my bank card because it did not work the day before when I tried to pay in a shop and I did not understand why. Also, I wanted to ask some questions about my account and maybe get more information about online banking services because I want to use them more in the future. So, I knew that I needed to speak to a bank employee directly. When I arrived at the bank, I saw a large modern building with big glass windows and automatic doors. As I walked inside, I noticed that there were many people and the place looked quite busy even though it was still morning. Some people were standing in a line near the counters, others were sitting in chairs and waiting for their turn, and a few people were talking quietly with bank employees. The atmosphere was calm and organized, but at the same time, I could feel a little tension because everyone seemed focused on their own problems and tasks. At that moment, I realized that I needed to understand how the system works in this bank because it was not just a simple line. I looked around carefully and saw a small machine near the entrance. People were going to this machine, pressing buttons, and getting a small piece of paper with a number on it. Then I noticed a large screen on the wall that showed numbers and desk numbers. So I understood that this was a queue system. At first, I felt a bit confused and unsure because I did not know which button to press or which option to choose. There were several options on the screen, like account services, cards, and payments. I stood there for a moment and watched what other people were doing, and this helped me understand what I should do. Finally, I pressed the option for card services and received my number, which was number 27. After that, I walked to the waiting area and found an empty chair. I sat down and looked at the screen, waiting for my number to appear. While I was waiting, I observed the people around me more carefully. Some people looked relaxed, others looked worried or tired, and a few people were speaking on the phone or checking messages. I also saw some people filling out forms, and I thought that maybe I would need to do that too. As I waited, I started thinking about what I wanted to say when it was my turn. I knew that it was important to explain my problem clearly and calmly. So I began to repeat some useful sentences in my head. For example, I thought, "Hello, I have a problem with my card, and it did not work yesterday when I tried to pay." I also prepared questions like, "Can you help me check my account? And do I need a new card?" At first, I felt a little nervous because I was not completely sure about my English and I did not want to make mistakes or forget important details. However, as time passed, I started to feel more confident because I had time to think and prepare. Waiting was not just boring. It actually helped me organize my thoughts and feel ready for the conversation. I also realized that going to the bank is not only about money or documents, but also about communication. It is a place where you need to explain, ask questions, listen carefully, and understand answers. Because of this, it is a very good situation to practice real-life English, especially at an A2 level, where you can already say more than just basic sentences. After waiting for some time, I finally saw my number 27 appear on the screen, and it showed that I should go to desk number 3. At that moment, I felt a small mix of nervousness and focus because now it was my turn to speak, and I wanted to explain everything clearly and correctly. I stood up, took my card and wallet in my hand, and walked slowly to the desk. When I arrived, I saw a bank employee sitting behind a computer. She looked friendly and professional. I smiled and said, "Hello," and she replied, "Good morning. How can I help you?" Her voice was calm, and this made me feel a little more relaxed. I sat down in the chair in front of her and started to explain my situation. I said, "I have a problem with my bank card. Yesterday, I tried to pay in a shop, but it did not work. I tried to speak slowly and clearly so she could understand me easily. She listened vнимательно and nodded, which showed me that she understood what I was saying. Then she asked me, 'Did you try to use the card in ATM or only in the shop?' I answered, 'Only in the shop.' Before that, it worked fine. Then I added, 'I don't know what the problem is, and I would like to check my account.' While I was speaking, I tried to remember all the important details so I did not forget anything. The bank employee asked me to give her my card and an ID document. I gave her my card and showed my ID. She started typing on her computer and checking the information. While she was working, I waited quietly, but inside I was still a bit worried because I did not know if the problem was serious. After a short time, she looked at me and said, "I see the problem. Your card was temporarily blocked for security reasons." I was surprised and asked, "Why was it blocked?" She explained, "There was an unusual transaction, so the system blocked the card to protect your account." I listened carefully and felt both worried and relieved at the same time. Worried because something unusual happened, but also relieved because the bank was protecting my money. Then I asked, "What can I do now? Can I use my card again?" She smiled and said, "Yes, I can unblock it for you now, or we can order a new card if you prefer." I thought for a moment and decided that I wanted to unblock the current card first. I said, "If possible, I would like to unblock it." During this conversation, I realized how important it is to ask clear questions and listen carefully to the answers. Even if my English was not perfect, I could still communicate and understand the situation step by step. By the end of this interaction, I felt more confident because I successfully explained my problem, answered questions, and understood the solution. Speaking with the bank employee was not as difficult as I expected, and it was a very useful real-life English experience. Audied and started working on her computer again. While she was typing, she explained, "I will unblock your card, and after that, you should be able to use it normally again." I watched her vнимательно and felt a bit curious about how everything works in the system. After a short time, she said, "Okay, your card is active again." I felt relieved and said, "Thank you very much." But then I thought that this was a good moment to ask a few more questions because I was already there and I wanted to understand my account better. So I said, "Can I ask you a few more questions about my account?" She smiled and said, "Of course." This made me feel more comfortable because I did not feel rushed and I knew I could take my time to speak. First, I asked, "Can I check my account balance on my phone?" She answered, "Yes, you can use our mobile banking app." Then she explained how to download it and how to log in. She spoke clearly and slowly, which helped me understand everything better. I listened carefully and sometimes repeated small parts in my head to remember them. Then I asked another question, "Is it safe to use online banking?" She said, "Yes, It is safe if you follow some basic rules like not sharing your password and using a secure internet connection. I nodded and said, "Okay, I understand." This information was important for me because I want to use online banking more in the future. After that, I also asked about notifications. I said, "Can I get messages when I use my card?" She replied, "Yes, we can activate SMS or app notifications for you." I thought this was a very good idea because it helps me control my spending and notice any unusual activity quickly. I said, "Yes, please, I would like to have notifications." She activated this service for me and explained how it works. While she was speaking, I realized that asking questions is very important because you can learn useful things and feel more confident about your money in your account. At this point, I felt much better than when I first arrived at the bank. My card was working again. I learned something new about online banking and I understood how to manage my account better. Also, I felt proud of myself because I was able to ask several questions in English and understand the answers. This part of the experience showed me that the bank is not only a place to solve problems, but also a place to get useful information and improve your communication skills. After I solved the problem with my card and asked my questions, I realized that I still had one more important thing to do. I needed to make a transaction because I wanted to deposit some cash into my account. I thought it was a good idea to do everything at once while I was already at the bank. So I said to the bank employee, I would also like to deposit some money into my account. She nodded and said, "Of course, I can help you with that." Her calm and friendly attitude made the situation easier, and I felt more confident to continue speaking. She asked me, "How much money would you like to deposit?" I took the cash from my wallet, looked at it quickly, and said, "I would like to deposit 200 euros. I placed the money carefully on the desk, and she counted it in front of me to make sure everything was correct. I watched vнимательно because I wanted to be sure there were no mistakes. Then she started typing again on her computer and said, "I will add this amount to your account." While she was doing that, I asked, "How long does it take for the money to appear in my account?" She answered, "It will be available immediately." This made me feel satisfied because I needed to use the money later that day. After she finished, she gave me a receipt and said, "Here is your confirmation." I took it and looked at the details. I saw the amount, the date, and my account information. I thought it was very useful to keep this receipt just in case I need it later. At that moment, I felt more relaxed because I completed another important task successfully. I also noticed that I was speaking more naturally than before. At the beginning, I was nervous, but now I felt more comfortable asking questions and understanding answers. Then I asked one more small question. Is there a limit for deposits or withdrawals? She explained, "Yes, there are limits depending on your account type, but I can give you more information if you want." I said, "Maybe next time," because I already received a lot of information that day. This part of my visit showed me that making transactions in a bank is not very difficult if you stay calm, speak clearly, and listen carefully. Even simple sentences are enough to complete important tasks. When everything was finished, I said, "Thank you for your help," and she replied, "You're welcome. Have a nice day." I smiled, but before leaving, I took a moment to check all my things again, my card, my wallet, and the receipt. After I finished all my tasks at the desk, I did not leave the bank immediately. Instead, I decided to stay for a few more minutes because I wanted to organize my thoughts, check my things, and also observe what was happening around me. This helped me feel more relaxed and also gave me a chance to notice details that I did not see before. First, I stepped away from the desk and moved to a quiet area near the wall. I took my wallet and carefully checked everything inside. I made sure that my bank card was there, that I had my ID, and that the receipt for my deposit was safe. I looked at the receipt again and read the information slowly, just to be sure that everything was correct. I felt satisfied because everything looked clear and organized. Then I sat down again for a short time and started to look around the bank more carefully. Now that I was not stressed or in a hurry, I could really see what was happening. I noticed how the system worked smoothly. People were coming in, taking numbers, waiting calmly, and then going to the correct desks when their numbers appeared on the screen. It all looked very organized, and I realized that even though the bank was busy, everything was under control. I also observed other people and their behavior. For example, I saw an older man talking seriously with a bank employee. He was asking many questions, and the employee was explaining everything slowly and clearly. Nearby, a young woman was filling out a form and checking something on her phone at the same time. Another person looked a bit nervous, just like I felt earlier, and I understood that many people feel this way in a bank. Watching these situations made me think about my own experience. At the beginning, I was unsure and a little stressed, but step by step, I became more confident. I understood that this is normal, especially when you need to speak another language. Everyone has their own problems and questions, and the bank employees are there to help. I also noticed small details like the quiet background music, the sound of people talking softly, and the clicking of keyboards. The environment was professional, but not uncomfortable. In fact, after some time, I started to feel quite calm there. While I was sitting, I also thought about what I learned during this visit. I learned new words and phrases like block a card, deposit money, and account balance. I also practiced asking questions, listening carefully, and reacting to answers. This made me feel proud because I used English in a real situation, not just in theory. Another important thought came to my mind. Preparation really helps. Because I spent time thinking about what to say while I was waiting, I was able to communicate more clearly. Next time, I will try to prepare even more, maybe by writing down some key phrases before I go to the bank. Finally, I took a deep breath and realized that I was ready to leave. I felt calm, confident, and satisfied with everything I had done. This short moment of observation and reflection helped me understand the experience better and feel more comfortable about similar situations in the future. After I finished everything and spent a few minutes sitting and thinking, I finally decided to leave the bank. I stood up, took my bag, and walked slowly toward the exit. As I moved through the bank, I looked around one more time. People were still coming in, taking numbers, and waiting for their turn. Everything continued as before, but now I felt different, more relaxed and confident. When I reached the door and stepped outside, I immediately noticed the fresh air and the sounds of the street. Cars were passing, people were walking, and the city felt alive. It was a small change, but after being inside the bank, it felt nice to be outside again. I took a deep breath and started walking down the street. As I walked, I began to think about my whole experience from the beginning. I remembered how I felt when I first arrived, a bit nervous, unsure, and not completely confident about speaking English. But step by step, everything became easier. I understood the system. I spoke with the bank employee. I solved my problem, and I even asked extra questions. I thought to myself, it was not as difficult as I expected. This was an important realization. Sometimes we imagine situations to be more difficult than they really are. In reality, if you stay calm, speak clearly, and listen carefully, you can manage the situation successfully. I also felt proud because I used English in a real life situation. I did not just study grammar or vocabulary. I actually communicated with another person and solved real problems. This gave me more confidence for the future. Now I feel that next time, I will be less nervous and more prepared. While I was walking, I also started to think about what I could do better next time. For example, I could prepare some key phrases in advance or learn more specific vocabulary about banking. I could also try to speak a bit more fluently and not worry too much about small mistakes. Another thing I noticed was how important it is to ask questions. When I asked questions, I got useful information and understood everything better. This made the whole experience easier and more comfortable. So next time, I will not be afraid to ask even more questions if I need help. By the time I reached the end of the street, I felt completely calm and satisfied. I knew that I had completed all my tasks, learned something new, and improved my English at the same time. It was not just a visit to the bank. It was also a learning experience. After I left the bank and continued my day, I started to think about how this experience would help me in the future. It was not just about solving one problem. It actually changed the way I feel about using bank services and speaking English in real situations. Later that same day, I decided to check my account using my phone because the bank employee told me about the mobile banking app. I downloaded the app, followed the instructions, and logged into my account. At first, I was a little careful because it was something new for me, but step by step, I understood how everything works. I could see my balance, check my recent transactions, and even see the deposit I made earlier that day. When I saw that everything was working correctly, I felt very satisfied. It was a good feeling to know that I could control my money easily and safely. I also remembered the employee's advice about security, so I made sure to keep my password private and not use public Wi-Fi when checking my account. A few days later, I had another small situation where I needed to use my card in a shop. Before, I might have felt worried because of the problem I had, but this time I felt much more confident. I used my card and it worked perfectly. I smiled a little because I knew that the problem was solved and everything was under control. I also noticed that I was thinking in English more often when I used banking services. For example, I remembered phrases like check my balance, make a payment, and view transactions. This showed me that real life experience helps you remember language better than just studying from a book. Another important change was my confidence. Before this visit, I felt unsure about going to the bank and speaking English. Now, I feel much more comfortable. I know what to expect, I understand the process, and I'm not afraid to ask questions or explain my situation. I also started to think that next time I go to the bank, I can do even more. Maybe I can ask about saving accounts, loans, or other services. I am not afraid anymore because I know that I can communicate, even if my English is not perfect. This experience taught me that practice in real situations is very important. When you use English in your daily life, you improve faster and feel more confident. Mistakes are normal, but communication is the most important thing. By the end of the week, I realized that this simple visit to the bank helped me grow, not only in managing my money, but also in using English in real life. Now, let's talk about my overall thoughts and some advice for anyone visiting a bank, especially if you're learning English. After completing all my tasks, observing people, asking questions, and using bank services later, I feel that visiting a bank can be both useful and educational. It is a place where you can practice communication, solve real problems, and improve your confidence in everyday situations. First, I want to emphasize preparation. Before you go to a bank, it helps to know what you want to do. Make a short list of tasks, like checking your account, paying a bill, or asking about services. This makes it easier to explain your needs clearly and not forget anything important. For example, I repeated my sentences in my head while waiting for my turn, and this helped me speak more confidently. Second, don't be afraid to ask questions. Even if your English is not perfect, bank employees are used to helping people and explaining things slowly. Asking questions ensures that you understand everything correctly and feel comfortable with your money and account. Simple phrases like, "Can you help me?" or "What should I do next?" are enough for clear communication. Third, observe and learn. While waiting or sitting in the bank, watch how other people behave, how the queue works, and how the employees respond. This gives you useful clues about how to act politely and efficiently. I noticed that everyone followed the system calmly, and it helped me feel more relaxed and organized. Another piece of advice is check your documents and money carefully. After completing each task, I always looked at my receipt, my card, and my ID to make sure everything was correct. This is very important because it prevents mistakes and gives you confidence that everything is done properly. Finally, reflect on the experience. After leaving the bank, I walked slowly and thought about everything that happened. I realized that I had learned new vocabulary, practiced speaking English in real life, and completed my tasks successfully. Reflecting helps you remember the experience and feel more prepared for the future. In conclusion, visiting a bank is not just a routine task. It is also a learning opportunity. By preparing, asking questions, observing others, checking your work, and reflecting, you can complete your banking tasks confidently and improve your English at the same time. I hope this episode helps you feel ready for your own visits to a bank. Remember, communication is more important than perfection, and every visit is a chance to learn and practice.